Welcome to the Read Your Keys podcast. I'm your host, Joel Lopez. If you're enjoying the content, please like, squish, and smash those like, follow, and subscribe buttons. We are on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Today, my guest is Noah Revoy. You can find him on Twitter, and you can find him on his website, noahrevoy.com. He is the internet's father, relationship expert that will help you build high-trust families and organizations that prosper, and the author of Become Immune to Manipulation, Secret Tactics and Dirty Tricks Manipulators Use, Exposed. Noah,
Thank you for
great
having
to
me on.
finally speak to you, man.
Yeah, it's great. I'm happy, and actually, this works out. It's good timing for me because your last season finished up around the time my book launched.
Uh-huh.
So it's good now we have my book to talk about instead of
Right.
talking it theoretically. Can
Uh-huh.
actually send people there and they can actually get a copy of it. It's made in a size you can keep it with you so that when the questions come up that are in here in your real life, you can have that in your office desk or at home somewhere where you can use it to respond to that.
That's a pretty just a powerful title. And, after the last 2 years that the kind of world has gone through, uh like perfect timing for something like
Yeah.
this. What I mean, this is something like I always think that there's universal truths that kind of last the test of time. So that this, to me, that's a thing. But what was the kind of the inspiration for you to get into this subject and then write a book about it?
Yeah, I remember when COVID started, and I said I'm going to grow a beard and I'm not going to trim it until the COVID nonsense is over. Now I'm just not going to trim it. I like it. Um, but what I thought this won't last more than 3 months.
Hmm.
People are gonna not, people are gonna see through it. They're gonna resist somewhat to this. And I was overly optimistic, and I did this thing that I tend to do, where I I give other people the competency that I have to
Hmm.
see through things.
Hmm.
And some people help me realize that that's not correct. You
Hmm.
shouldn't be doing that because the things that I know because I've taken time to study how people are manipulated, how people are tricked and fooled, and really, I worked with some great people that understand and they study like a science how lies are perpetuated in society. There's a masculine and feminine way of lying. Doesn't mean that only men or women can do the other one. It's
Hmm.
just it depends on your mindset. If you have a more masculine or feminine mindset, you'll lie in different ways. And so, going through all of these things, I had an experience that other people didn't have, and that helped me to see when I was being manipulated or not, and to resist it. And I thought to myself, I can't replicate everything that happened to me, and I can't give people some of the great experiences I had as a child. For example, my great grandmother, she would tell me repeatedly, she'd get me quiet because you're a kid, you don't learn anything when you're distracted. She'd get me
Hmm.
quiet and she'd say, what is it that we believe? And I would say, oh, my church or my religion or whatever, or we're Christians or whatever. And she'd say, no, no. She says, it's the truth. Truth is what you need to chase. Chase the truth wherever it takes you. And she says that will put you at odds with most people in your
Hmm.
life.
Hmm.
Chase the truth wherever it puts you. And if it happens to take you in one of those directions, then that's where you're finding truth. It doesn't even need to be in the Bible, or he says it could be in nature,
Hmm.
could be in the study of nature, of science, of reality, the study of other people. She says, but you go chase the truth. That's what we believe in, is chasing the truth, finding what's true, and and then pulling that into us and making it part of how we make decisions. And so I was inoculated in this way against falsehoods and against manipulation at a young age, even though I was also at the same time being subjected to it, as we all are.
Hmm.
And what I
Right.
decided to do then is take the things that I've learned over my lifetime. I'm in my mid 40s, and the unique experiences that I've had, and create a system that allows people to find out whether they're being manipulated.
Hmm.
Because how do you know you're being manipulated? Most people say, I felt like I was being manipulated. But your
Hmm.
feelings are a poor platform to base decisions off of. If you feel your spouse is manipulating you, what are you going to do about it? It's a feeling. You're going to start a fight over a feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can look and go, no, no, objectively, I am being manipulated. Now you can start to repair that relationship. There's, just because someone's manipulating you doesn't mean they're malicious. Most people that manipulate do so because they have legitimate needs that
Mm-hmm.
they need to get met. And the only way they know how to get their needs met is through manipulation. They're just resorting to the only thing they know. And it's our job, if someone's using those methods on us, to figure out what it is they really want and to help them get it without manipulation, to let them know that no, manipulation doesn't work on me, but here's how you can interact with me in a positive way. Because if we just cut out all the manipulators, we're going to be alone. There's just be
Mm-hmm.
us. We will exist in a vacuum.
Um, I think a great kind of thing to separate, is there a difference between persuasion and
Mm-hmm.
manipulation? Because manipulation always sounds negative. Is there I'm just thinking out loud with you. Like I said, I don't have questions written. So is there positive manipulation? Like, hey, I want you to do this thing that's good for you. So, and then we'll
Well,
say,
that, that's a
say
that's a
it is good.
yeah,
We'll say it
that's a
is good.
fantastic question. So people will look at the outcome of the manipulation and they'll say the outcome was positive,
Mm-hmm.
or at least the initial outcome, the immediate outcome. My
Mm-hmm.
kid brushed his teeth. I told
Mm-hmm.
him if he doesn't brush his teeth, he's going to have terrible breath and everyone's going to laugh at him. And then his teeth will all fall out and he'll look stupid. So
Mm-hmm.
you better go brush your teeth. In the
Mm-hmm.
short term, that works because you get the result you want. In the long term, what that does is it breaks the trust because the kid eventually finds out that I don't need to brush my teeth every single day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we should brush our teeth every single day, but if
Right.
I miss a
Right.
day, I'm not going. My
Yeah.
teeth aren't going to fall out. Okay. And
Mm-hmm.
now he says, "What else have they been lying to me about?" So
Right.
it breaks the trust.
Right. The analogy, I mean, it's the analogy taken to the absurd.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
get the point, right? Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it takes it to the extreme. Now we can still we can persuade our child to brush his teeth, but there
Mm-hmm.
is interestingly there, and we'll get into that in a moment. But there is times when manipulation is an acceptable tactic. So manipulation is a form of social and emotional warfare. And
Mm-hmm.
just like there are times when violence is an acceptable tactic in our own defense,
Mm-hmm.
manipulation can be used in our defense as well. We don't use violence to get our kids to do things. We don't use violence to get our spouse to do things.
Mm-hmm.
We persuade them. Okay, the same. We don't use manipulation to get them to do things. But what if we're encountering someone that's truly trying to harm us?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's examples of women, for example, have been kidnapped, and they've used manipulation on the kidnapper to get him to let them go.
Uh-huh.
That's an acceptable use of manipulation. Just
Yeah.
like if she could physically defend herself, it
Mm-hmm.
would be acceptable to use violence to protect herself. So in those cases, it's okay to use manipulation.
That's
May even
interesting
be the
though.
best
Just
way.
connecting violence in itself. It's like, hey, that does not sound good.
Yeah,
But if you're defending yourself, yes, the use of violence is justified and necessary to protect your life, your family, what
yeah,
have you. Manipulation, I never thought of it in that form either, because violence I understand because I'm a man,
yeah,
I get that. Manipulation that's one of the reasons I want to talk to you, because I never really kind of like thought about the subject. Your title is amazing, it's provocative, and like me, I like that stuff. I dig it. But used in defense like that, that's just a great. I just think it's great. I had never thought about that. That's pretty cool.
Well, we have two kinds of conflict that we engage in. With our friends and our family, and hopefully with our coworkers, we also only engage in what we would call cooperative conflict.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a disagreement with each other, but we're trying to cooperate for mutual gain. We're trying to
Mm-hmm.
work together. We just have some sort of disagreement, and we work that out through. We should be working that out, not using violence or manipulation, because those are tools of war. Those are
Mm-hmm.
for fighting enemies. We
Mm-hmm.
should be using persuasion, which is when we find out what the other person needs and we persuade them to do something which satisfies both their needs and our needs. So we find the
Mm-hmm.
win-win situation.
Right, the win-win.
Sometimes that means doing nothing because you can't make everyone happy.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that means taking turns being happy. it's very much depends on what your specific needs are, and that is how we should be doing cooperative confrontations or cooperative conflict. But then we have an adversarial conflict. So with an enemy where you're fighting
Mm-hmm.
between nations, or someone's trying to rob you, and you're trying to get away alive.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, it is okay to use tools that wouldn't be okay in a cooperative relationship. Now, you can still persuade them. You can still stick to using, you could say, the light side of the force type thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
you could persuade them, look, let me go, take my money, let me go. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but you can't put violence and manipulation down as something you're never going to use in those situations, because you handicap yourself.
Yeah.
And when you come up to those situations, you need to have everything available
Right.
to you.
That's really cool. You had mentioned something I'd never heard this term before, but like, I don't know if you called it, going back, lying, but feminine and masculine. Like,
Mhm.
what what
So
did you mean by?
there's a
I had
feminine
never
way.
I had never heard like
Yeah.
masculine lying, because like I've always tried to like not be a liar, so I try to stay away from it. So like, but I understand that, going through the research for manipulation, that lying is a part of that. So like I had never thought of that, but like, yeah, like masculine lying, like I don't know if I have an idea of it, but it sounds like interesting. So like what do you mean by masculine lying and feminine lying? And
So
and
the
and
human,
and you separate it too.
yeah.
It's not just men lying and women lying. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it could be either one.
Yeah, a man can employ feminine techniques of lying, and a woman can employ masculine techniques of lying.
Mm-hmm.
We just tend to employ the technique that lines up with our brain structure, and men's brains are structured one way and women's another. So women tend to have what we call an empathizing brain. So the woman's empathizing brain says, we're all unique, and everyone is different, and I need to take care of everyone. Think of it as a mother. It's the
Mm-hmm.
mother mind.
Mm-hmm.
And men have a systematizing brain. So men can go easily set up a hierarchy. If you put 10 men in a room, every single one of those men knows who's the most dominant man in the room in about 5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Probably in 5 seconds, most of them know.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone knows who's strongest. Everyone knows who's most physically capable. They talk for 5 minutes, and everyone knows who's smartest.
Mm-hmm.
And we're also, for the most part, unless you're a dysfunctional man, you don't you don't even feel bad about not being on top. You're like, oh no, that's a hierarchy. And if we're all on the same team, that's cool. Because
Mm-hmm.
in a way, I have access to that other guy's potential,
Mm-hmm.
because we're on the same team. And
Mm-hmm.
it's fine. And so we have what we call systematizing brains, where we put everything into a system. When men lie, we lie systematically. So we won't just lie. We'll create an entire um, bureau in the government that is structured lying from
Right.
top to bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll create an entire system of lies, like the global warming,
Mm-hmm.
the whole lie set of lies around that. So there's some truth in there, which there is in most lies, with a whole bunch of add-ons that are lies, and it's systemized. It's scientifically,
Mm-hmm.
it appears scientifically true,
Empirical, right?
empirical. Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
the other hand, women will say, um, people are beautiful at every size. So this is the feminine lie.
Mm-hmm.
Men look at that and go, even men who are dishonest look at that and go, that's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Of course it isn't. It's so easy to rank people by appearance, and the
Yeah.
obese are not going to be ranked as high as someone that's fit. And so what they're doing is they're looking at each individual as a person and saying that person is beautiful because they're a human being. Okay, but it's still not true, because it's objectively false. So the problem is that it's very easy to counter feminine lies, because they don't make any sense. They're kind
Mm-hmm.
of crazy. Okay, you can't counter them necessarily to the woman. Her child is the most beautiful child in the world, no matter how
Yeah.
ugly and stupid he
Yeah.
is. He's the best one in the world, and that's good.
You
We
need moms
want
to be
her
like
to
that.
think
Yeah.
like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
we actually want her to think like that, so
Mm-hmm.
that she takes care of her child properly.
Is that
The
the
real
same with a
danger is that,
man, like, and his wife, right? It's like she's the most beautiful. Like,
yeah,
you need to believe that, because that's going to
yes,
keep you from, like, all right,
yeah,
I'm out of here.
absolutely. And I like, because I have a, like, almost pains me to lie. So the way I think of it is, you're the most beautiful, with my wife, you're the most beautiful woman in the world to me. Because I didn't lie. To me. The to me allows me to say this. It becomes true to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
And I recognize it's not objectively true.
Uh-huh.
I mean, there's only one most beautiful woman in the world, so every other woman is
Right.
not. It's not
Yeah.
objectively true.
Right.
But
You're
but
so
it
funny that way. That's
yeah.
funny.
And even then, I will usually not say. I say most attractive, because
Hmm.
attraction is more than just looks.
Right. That's good.
And even the history you share with your wife creates attraction.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah,
And
that's
where
very
where
true.
we have a real danger is in the masculine systematized lying. And the reason that's so destructive is because you take all the competency of men at creating systems that self-perpetuate and work on their own, and then you distort them.
Hmm.
And now it's very easy to manipulate people using these systems.
Hmm.
Look at how badly people were manipulated during the COVID epidemic.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was COVID's real. It exists. There was
Right.
I don't know if you would call it an epidemic any more than every seasonal cold and flu is an epidemic,
Right.
but the way people were manipulated with that relied a lot on masculine systematizing. The
Right. All
entire
the whole gamut that kind of came
Yeah,
along with it that reinforced
yeah,
the the lie that was being perpetuated.
yeah. The
What
whole
about, so that's on a systematic level, but is there something more like on an individual level? So say like I'm masculine lying or feminine lying. What does that look like? Because it sounds like it's you're talking feelings.
Yeah. So for us as individuals, so for a man, the kind of lying that we're going to be prone to falling for and perpetuating is things like getting involved in cults.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean religion itself,
Mm-hmm.
but going, and when I say cults, I don't mean religious cults necessarily. It can be
Oh, that's true.
social
Yeah.
cults. It can
Mm-hmm.
be, I mean, there are cults that don't have any true religious aspect that are massive right now,
Mm-hmm.
that have got lots of people captured in it. Basically, the Disney adult thing is a cult.
That's interesting to me too. But
Yeah,
yeah, I get what you're saying. Do you have
and
headphones, by the way?
oh, I don't. My headphone jack is messed up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, buy the most expensive Apple computer you can, and immediately the headphone jack gets messed up.
No way.
And apparently, that's not covered under warranty. So,
Ooh. So yeah, that's interesting though about the cults and the systemization, and then so that's masculine lying, and then on the feminine side, it's the feelings. What would that be on the individual level? Like not going the whole what did you say, beauty at any size? What does that look like
yeah,
for
the
just like on
the
a
feminine
say
version is
I'm feminine
yeah,
lying too, me a man, feminine lying.
yeah. So if you're a man, the feminine line will come out as um, saying whatever you can to please the people around you. So, for example, telling your wife whatever you need to keep peace in the family, even if it means your family falls apart
Mm-hmm.
long term because of it. And this is a huge problem with men. They'll
Mm-hmm.
notice some serious problem in their wife that needs to be corrected, and they won't say anything.
Mm-hmm.
And they'll allow, and women don't like this either. Women hate being corrected, but they also know you don't care if you don't do it occasionally. And the same with the children, and so their kids will be going down this bad path, and they'll just go along to get along, not rock the boat, be real quiet, and they end up being kind of a decoration in the house
Yeah.
rather than a father and husband.
That is really interesting, because that's something that uh, I've noticed personally, of like husbands who, like, once they get married, now it's like they're not around anymore.
Yeah,
Like, oh, like these people that were really close to you, you're not you're not hanging out with them anymore. It's like, oh, like you're not running the show. You're just trying to appease, your wife in the background. Just like, yeah, whatever. Like, so a clear example, like during the height of the epidemic, I was at a restaurant. I didn't wear a mask. Like, you know, I'm just a regular dude. I'm wearing like Mickey Mouse shirts. Like, I'm not like alpha guy. Like, you know me, like, I'm just like, hey man, I'm just gonna. So I come out the restaurant, and this like good old boy, like cowboy boots, like, guy that actually works with his hands kind of thing. Like, I got like, you know, soft hands, you know. I come out and he's like, "You're lucky," and I'm like, "I'm lucky for what?" And he's like, "My wife makes me wear a mask," and I'm like, "What?" Yeah, like my wife's a nurse, so I gotta wear this for her. And I'm like, what the, like, what are you talking about, man? Like, so that is like, I think a perfect example of what you're talking about. Like, guys, just like this is like, this is a burly, good old boy, work with his hands. Like, if I needed something fixed, like, hey, call him, don't call me. Like, I'm nerdy guy, right? I'm a
Someone
podcast
broke
guy.
into
Like,
his house in the middle of the night, he would break that man in two. But he
exactly.
can't stand up to his little wife.
Right, right. And I mean, I'm not gonna like let that happen either. So like, but the point is made that like I'm just like nerdy like cubicle worker guy, and this is like, my wife, she make me wear. I was like, what the heck is going on? That's when I
Well, the
knew.
external signals of masculinity do not mean that the person is necessarily
Mm-hmm.
masculine. And
Yeah.
I would actually say that the greatest signal of masculinity in men today is, do they cower before women or not?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's right now, if you're afraid of a man that's bigger than you, that's going to, that can beat you up,
Mm.
I have some sympathy for you,
Yeah.
somewhat. But you're afraid of a woman or women in general.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to tell young men this. It's like, go, oh, you like her? Well, go tell her you like her and ask her out. Oh no,
Mm.
but she might X, Y, and Z.
Uh,
What's she gonna do? Beat you up?
yeah, it's not Mike
Eat
Tyson.
you? Yeah, this is not Mike Tyson. This is not a lion. Go,
You like
go.
it?
I mean, what are the things men had to do in history to impress women? Fight giant predators, kill woolly mammoths with sharp
Yeah.
sticks, and
Yeah.
all you got to do is be a man
Talk to
and
her.
go up and ask
Talk to
her
her.
out. It is so easy.
That's
And
an interesting topic because I was talking to Joy Joheim, and so he works with a lot of guys, and they that is like a common theme that I'm hearing. Talking to Leela, same thing. Like
mm,
guys aren't asking out girls. Um, I think a lot of it might have to do with like social media, where you can just kind of like be a reply guy kind of thing, and like video. It's kind of like that video games. Like you can kind of save face by asking them out. It's not the real it's not the you don't get the real like feedback of like asking a girl out in person. Because I remember when I like called a girl, I was like, you were nervous. Like you called like, oh dang, her dad might pick up, and like, oh, I'm this boy calling and for their daughter, that whole thing. And then when you ask my wife out, it's like, well, I had to go meet her dad, and like it was nervous. But that was kind of like, well, there's no other option. If I'm calling, I have to call the house. Now they can message them directly on their smartphones, or just it's a lot easier points of contact
yeah,
when you
it's
don't have to kind of
sanitized.
like put yourself, where you don't have to like actually like put yourself in the arena, we'll say. Whereas before it was like, well, you don't have any choice. If you like the girl, then you have to get in the arena. So I try to give the young guys grace for that, but it is a problem still, I think.
Oh yeah, it is a problem. The thing I did when I was younger is I actually made it as hard for myself as possible. I never approached a woman I liked until because everybody that I met that I liked, I met through friends. I
Mm-hmm.
had no interest in a woman that I couldn't vet through friends, because
Okay.
that's I knew so many women through friends. I didn't need to meet strange women.
Mm-hmm.
First thing I did, if I liked her, go talk to her dad
Mm-hmm.
before I told her I liked her. And I tell
Mm-hmm.
the dad, I'm going to ask your daughter out.
Mm-hmm.
And because you ask a woman out, she likes you, the family hates you, that ain't going to work.
Mm-hmm.
How's that? How you going to live with that? You got to live with those in-laws.
Mm-hmm.
You know, men leave their family. It says that in Genesis. Man will leave
Right.
his family. No, women don't leave their family.
No,
No, and
that's very
and
true.
if they do, they also leave their entire support structure.
Mm-hmm.
So now when she has a baby, there's no mother-in-law to come by,
Mm-hmm.
help her clean the house, help take care of her during the first few weeks. Means you're going to do it all. You're going to make
Mm-hmm.
your life harder if you marry a woman whose parents don't like you. First thing I do is vet the dad. I
Uh-huh.
vet the dad before I vet the woman. And that, I know that sounds weird, and
It
it
does.
probably made my life harder,
It
but
did.
it meant that I understood, like, if I can respect the father, I'm going to like the daughter. If I can't respect the father, I'm probably not going to like the daughter.
Mm. How old were you when you did this?
Started doing this in my late teens.
You're funny, man. You can really see things, but that's an interesting thing though. But that's another thing that
Well, this came
like
from
yeah.
my family too, my unique upbringing. My
Oh,
great
okay.
grandparents, my great grandparents on my mother's side, one of the branches there, they ran a family eugenics program for about 450 years, and they had
Oh,
rules
okay.
about who was allowed to marry into the family,
Oh,
and they
okay.
didn't vet people; they vetted families.
Oh,
Okay, we vet
wow.
this family. People from this family can marry into our family. Then the individuals would get vetted if there was a match.
Yeah. That is interesting because I mean I have young kids, but then like I'm looking like my kids. My kids are, you know, I think I'm doing a decent job raising my kids. My wife is great mother. My kids are good looking, but I'm always looking for like, hey, would I want my daughter to be in this family? Yes, or so that's kind of like, I think maybe like I am doing it consciously, but I mean it's a long ways away,
Yeah.
or I guess it'll come faster than I think. But um, that is interesting that you kind of came from that background, so that was already kind of built in. Like you have so many fascinating stories. Like this is like a whole other. So
Well,
so
this
you
is my
came.
rule for even for making male peer friends
Mm-hmm,
is is this the kind of guy I want to be the father-in-law of my son?
mm-hmm,
If not, if I don't want, if I wouldn't potentially mix my genes with this guy's genes, I don't even want him as a friend. It's a
mm-hmm,
good heuristic to use.
mm-hmm.
Perhaps the person will never have kids,
Yeah.
but it's a good heuristic to use because if the person is not someone that, I mean, if you think so little of the person that if they had kids, you wouldn't want their kids marrying your kids. What are you
Mm-hmm,
doing being friends with that person and signaling to your children that this is a great person you should be friends with?
mm-hmm. When you how are you defining like friend in that instance? Is it like somebody like you're hanging out with on the
That would be
weekends,
someone that
or
I see on a like a regular basis that I'm gonna like train with weekly, that
oh,
I'm gonna go to their
go
house,
have
they're gonna
dinner
come to my
over?
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, the kind of
Okay.
person, yeah, like I could say, dude, I gotta go out with my wife. I'm gonna go out with my wife this weekend. Can you and your wife take care of my kids?
Mm-hmm.
Like people that I would trust with my children,
Yeah.
and people that I would trust if something ever happened to me to look in on my wife and make sure that my family's okay.
Let me
That's what I call friends.
let me ask you this because you're in Portugal and I'm in America, and so something that I've noticed, and we've done it too, is that families here move like every 2 to 5 years. Everybody's moving. In Portugal, is it more established where it's like, okay, we're here from, let's say, this area or this house. You've been in this house for, my family's been in this house for 20 years, 30 years, because that's very rare here from what I've observed for people to kind of have that. Is that something that's
There
more
are plenty
common
of
in Portugal?
places in Portugal where you talk to the locals and they're like, "Oh yeah, my family's been here for 1,000 years." I
Mm-hmm.
talked to an old lady, and she was saying that her house there where she lived that she's going to give to her grandkids. She says this house has been in my family for 1,100 years
Mm-hmm.
since it was a Muslim city, since before
Mm-hmm.
the Reconquest.
Mm-hmm.
It's been in her house. She's got records. She says, I was born here. My daughter was born here. My
Mm-hmm.
granddaughter was the first person not to be born in the house in 1,100 years of my ancestors. It's a level of rootedness that we can't
Yeah.
imagine. And
Mm-hmm.
those people don't move. And even when they move away, they won't move to another part of Portugal necessarily. They'll go to another part of Europe and they'll come back when they retire.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm seeing that less and less. If you can work online from anywhere, why not live in the village of your ancestors,
Yeah.
where everybody's a third cousin, fourth cousin, you know?
There is something to that deep rootedness because I've never experienced. I mean, like, so I'm Mexican, so I go to visit Mexico, but even there, like, my family kind of moved around, so it was more like people rooted, I guess, as opposed to like a physical location of like, oh, this is where we're from. I would imagine that's what it's like for the Jews to go back to Israel. It's like, hey, this is a place of like deep history. But I think that's something that's more common in Europe to have places like Portugal, whereas America, like I just moved into this house. There was nothing here like 2 years ago. There was nothing, and now it's like, subdivision pops up, and I'm I make the attempt to kind of like get to know my neighbor just so I know like who's around, and like, hey, like I have kids, so it's like, hey, like if you see the kids around, those are mine. So don't, like, I'm the dad. I come around. I don't like they're not just out there like stray cats or whatever. But I think that's it makes me jealous,
Yeah.
for what Portugal, because I've met people who are Portuguese too here in the States, and they're just like, yeah, Portugal, like, in Mexico you kind of get that so much, but like I can't think of it like for it to be common to even have a few hundred years in a place. But there is something to that to have that deep rootedness of like, I know who I am, I know where I'm from, like, going back to the manipulation, right? I haven't read the book, but to me, like, it makes it harder. I want it to be hard to manipulate, to be manipulated, because I know who I am. So like, if
Yeah.
I root myself in the right place, then, like you had mentioned, being rooted in the truth, it makes it very difficult to be manipulated when it's like, well, you're telling me this stuff, but I'm rooted. My goal is to be root myself into truth, and so I can take a step back and not take what you're saying at face value, or whatever. Because wait a minute, like my senses are kind of going crazy right now, and now my brain is running. So, but
Well, here's
that
the other thing too.
rootedness.
You get this communal solidarity. So it's not just you rooted down, it's you cross rooted with your neighbors who
Mm-hmm.
are not just your neighbors, they are truly your family.
Mm-hmm.
If you are old stock Portuguese, so not one of the, like myself, that recently immigrated, I'm not Portuguese. I can never be Portuguese, even if I become a citizen,
Okay.
because Portuguese is a thing. You had to be here for the last 1,000 years to be Portuguese.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's about when mass immigration ended, from more Europeans coming in during the Reconquest. So if you've been here that long, everybody in the country is your niece, is your cousin, or your uncle, or your aunt. They're somehow
Mm-hmm.
related to you a few generations ago. And what that creates is this massive, excuse me, massive solidarity where people help each other out and don't need to know who the other person is and don't need to ever see them again. I'm going to help you.
Uh-huh.
If I never see you again, it's fine. I'm sure you'll help my cousin, and he'll help
Uh-huh.
another person, which will then help me again. And you just, there's this higher level of trust.
Uh-huh.
And I see that as society is collapsing, I actually think this is one of the places in the world where very high trust will remain, because it's based on familial connection with people. And I think that's going to outlive governmental collapse and the collapse of rule of law.
I like that you said that, because like I moved away from like my family and friends like in my early 20s, and then I remember like there were people who were familiar with me, but like I always felt like I had to kind of like introduce myself to everybody. But then when I'd go back home with my family and my like friends who knew me from like grade school or whatever, like you could just sit and just be like, me. So like there's no like, and it seems like that like that trust that you said, I guess that's probably what it is. It's that trust. Like
Yep.
you've known me for years. You've seen me when I was stressed out. Like I've seen you when you were stressed out, whatever. Like you know me. So yeah, I was a kid then, but now I'm an adult. So like I haven't seen you in a few years. Hey man, what's up? Like that sounds like that on and I don't know. It's really beautiful. Like it really is, because going back to like, so where are you from then? Because I thought you were Portuguese, so you're not originally from Portugal.
No, I'm actually originally from Canada. So I was
Oh,
I was
okay.
born in Canada, and my ancestors, the ones who had rules for marrying in and stuff, they came actually originally from the lowlands of Europe. So it wasn't a country at the time,
Uh-huh.
around Flanders and those type of areas. And what they decided to do, I have a feeling like they were Christian, but they refused to be part of any organized church.
Hmm.
And if you look at the stuff they wrote down, I think they only became nominally Christian about the time they started making records about 450 years ago, which meant that they would have been one of the very last people in Europe that converted to Christianity.
Hmm.
There were still pagan groups out in those areas at that time, so they would have been one of the last to convert. And the reason I say this is because they wrote down what they believed, and it was very, very primitive Christianity. They refused to accept what the church said. They went back to the Bible and start reading it from scratch because
Mm-hmm.
their concern was whatever was true.
Mm-hmm.
And their level of education and understanding of everything without being part of the system of at that time meant that they must have had a much older educational route that they came from.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not exactly sure they didn't write that down. It would have been very dangerous for them to keep records of that if
Mm-hmm.
they ever got caught and someone read those books. You know, the moment Christianity came to your area, you had to have been a Christian since the dawn of time. You know,
Mm-hmm.
otherwise it wasn't safe. And I
Uh-huh.
think that they were probably one of the last people to convert from paganism to Christianity. That's why it was like this. And they lived in an area where they were extremely isolated because they didn't like government. They hated taxation. They refused to pay taxes. And they always moved to wherever they didn't have to pay taxes. So they
Mm-hmm.
moved from there to when Catherine the Great was giving land out in Russia. They moved to Russia along the Volga River.
Mm-hmm.
And they were there a little while and they realized Russian society was decaying and there was going to be a end of the world scenario in Russia, which was what allowed communism to enter.
Mm-hmm.
Communism filled a vacuum in Russia. There was
Right.
total social collapse and it filled the vacuum. That's
Mm-hmm.
why it was so easy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're trying to create in America right now is a vacuum for communism to fill.
Mm-hmm.
Because communism isn't strong enough to push its way in on its own. It has to fill. You have to collapse the current system first.
Nature abhors a vacuum, right? So
Yes,
something has to fill it. You take something out, you have to fill it with something
absolutely.
else.
And if you've
And
got anything, you're not going to accept communism. It's like anything but communism. So you have to get rid of everything so that
uh-huh.
they can fill that vacuum. And they ended up going to Canada again in the middle of nowhere in Saskatchewan just to get away from taxation, government, and the church.
Mm.
And they lived like that. They kept records of births and deaths and everything that they did for about 400 years between the time they left the west of Europe and the time that they arrived in Canada.
And then so you're born and raised Canadian until how long you decided like, hey, Portugal, what's up?
Well, when I was in my late teens, I had been running a business, which I think you wanted to talk about. Though we can
Oh
talk about
yeah,
that
that'd be
later.
great. Yeah, go
Yeah, I've
ahead.
been running a business, and after that business, that was a high stress business I was running. I thought I should do something. Don't I dropped out of school at 15, so I had the world ahead of me, and I could do
Mm-hmm.
anything I wanted. And because I had basically no fear, almost to a dangerous level, I thought, let's go to Brazil. That sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I looked how I could go to Brazil because I'm not going to just get on a plane and go to Brazil because immigration and all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What I thought was, let's look for a job down there first that requires you to be Canadian. So instead of using that as a handicap, I'm going to make that a requirement. And I
Mm-hmm.
found a great job down there. The problem
This
is
is
you had to get,
pre-internet too, right? Or
yeah, it's
like
pre-internet.
internet in its infancy at least.
Yeah. Well, what I did is I went to the government because the government
Oh,
had an internet of jobs that
okay,
were connected with government and government contractors.
okay.
So they were looking for contractors to go down to Brazil and act as not translators necessarily, although you eventually had to learn the language so you could translate, but to
Mm-hmm.
act as a connection between North American investors and Brazilian places to invest,
Mm-hmm.
factories and all that. Brazil was busy with a rapid industrialization at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a good job. It was really cool. I'd be rubbing shoulders with millionaires and billionaires. It was the absolute perfect job for a young person. And just before I got old enough to be accepted into the program ended like few weeks before.
No way.
So I'm like, okay, let me figure
Uh-huh.
out something else to do.
Uh-huh.
And I started my own home renovation business. Ran that for a short period of time. And
In
I
Brazil?
actually no here back in Canada.
You went back home. Okay.
Yeah,
Back to Canada.
was in Canada there doing that, and I decided that I was going to go for a vacation to Portugal with my Portuguese friends that we talked about since we were like 6 years old.
So you'd
Doing that,
never been there, no
no,
experience.
no,
Okay.
we kept trying to go, and like their schedule and my schedule would never match up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of their cousins, who's a football player, was having a wedding, and was supposed to be absolutely insane because it's a football player. So
Mhm.
everything is 100 times bigger and splashier.
Mhm.
And so we went down there. We came over here to Portugal, and I enjoyed myself a lot at the wedding.
Mhm.
And on the second week I was here, I met my wife.
Mhm.
And about an hour after I met her, I said to my friends, I think I'm going to have to marry this woman. you know, it's like, I think I'm going to have to marry this woman. And
Uh-huh.
they're like, I don't know. She's too much like you. I don't know if you want someone that's so much like you.
Uh-oh, yeah.
And now there was some merit to that, because
Yeah.
I often tell guys, get a woman that contrasts with you.
Mhm.
Okay. But it happened to work out well. And it was just before September 11th. So there was a period where I couldn't fly back to Portugal for a while. So I renovated
Oh,
my
this happened
mom's
right after
home.
September 11th. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
this is a long time ago. We're
Yeah,
having
yeah, yeah.
around September. It's 20 years married now.
Yeah.
And so then when I finally came back, what I said to her was, I said, I'm going to come to Portugal by the end of my visa, the 3 months visa. We're either going to be engaged or it'll be the end of the relationship. So you're
Mhm.
going to know in 3 months. And I already pretty much knew. It was a matter of convincing her. And
And
I
so
had a
so did
few.
you do that whole so you did the whole I'm going to go talk to her dad first then?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was
No,
that was that
I
was that
talked to her
strange?
dad
Was
while
that
I was in
strange then?
Portugal on vacation.
Was that strange to her dad to like, oh, this young man is coming to talk to me first? Because I don't know if that's common over there. I'd never heard of it. Like even before,
I mean,
like
it's the
maybe
old
I've
way people used to do things if you go
uh
150 years
yeah.
back. But I think he was a little flattered
Mm-hmm.
about it. And, and also I think it was odd to him, but flattering as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now think of it. If a guy wanted to date your daughter and first came to you and said,
Mm-hmm.
like, I want to get to know you first, because your
Yeah.
relationship with your father-in-law is like having a second father. It's a pretty big deal.
Yes, it is.
If you guys don't jive, you guys don't get along, maybe the marriage will still work, but you're missing out on a huge part of adult life,
Yes.
is getting along with your in-laws. And judging by how many people don't get along with their in-laws, they haven't vetted the families properly.
Yeah. And that's something that's interesting to me because I did the same, but maybe not quite to the extent. It was like, I'm marrying her, but I'm also marrying her family. Can I
Yeah,
get along with their family? Like, maybe I would have done it either way, but I prefer to be able to get along. So I actually enjoy when my in laws come and visit. It's not like, oh, like I'm going to go in the garage. My in laws are coming. It's like, dude, like, this is an important decision. Um, I love that we're talking about this because Dan Go said something on to me. He was like, the older generations need to pass down, their wisdom, and the younger generations need to pass up. So and that's exactly it with your father-in-law relationship. Like, I have my own father, and like you don't really get to pick who your dad is. Like it's just
yeah,
kind of like, hey, this is what you got. You have the opportunity, kind of, when you marry, and is this somebody who, when I have issues or whatever, can he pass down wisdom to him? Because he obviously, you would hope that there is something there. So I think just having that conversation is just a super interesting point because the level now for guys to date is like, hey, they just want to have sex, and then maybe something happens, and then they kind of just like happen into a marriage, and then it's like, no, like you wouldn't do that with a major business decision or your education. Like your family is gonna impact that even so much more. Like you're talking about rooted for hundreds of years. Like that, it could be that, but you have to be even more so now. I think extra intentional, and even more so if you're not in a culture like it sounds like you are, where there's deep rootedness. Like here in America, I think that might be a big crisis. We'll say there's rootlessness. So there's people who are not rooted in their identities, in the right identities, and they're not rooted physically anywhere. So it's just like I think that lends itself to being easily manipulated. I mean, I haven't
well,
read the
this is
book,
why
but
all of the sexual identity stuff is so big deal in the
mhm,
US.
mhm,
That was only a big deal when you now don't have any other way to identify yourself.
mhm,
People lament the fact that humans are tribal. Don't lament it. It is what it is. It's like
mhm,
lamenting that we only have two eyes. It is what
mhm.
we are. It's who we are. Humans are tribal. It doesn't mean we have to have intertribal conflict, but we need to belong to something. We need to be
Yeah,
part of something. And I think that has actually been missed a lot in the Jordan Peterson era of self-help is the fact that yes, you're an individual, you have individual responsibilities, but if you do not belong to something greater than yourself, you're very fragile. You'll get blown
Yes.
away on the first wind.
I think that's why people will like use like gangs, right? It's like it's a place to belong. For me, sports was huge, and when my time playing was over, like I had, it's like what now? There's no mission, there's no nothing. And military, same thing. It's like they leave, they come back. There's no brotherhood. So there has to be something. Culturally, whatever, where you can have that, and you build that with your family. And so that's one of the things I'm working on, is building like I have 5 kids. I thought we were done at 2, and then we had 4, and then I thought we were done at 4, and it was just like after all this, it's like, well, you know what? I want them to have another sibling, another teammate. Like, so let's see if the equipment still works. So it's like, all right, it worked, great. Like, all right, so here's another one. So um, you have to be, and maybe I haven't been that intentional. I kind of just like do stuff and just kind of see if it works. And I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, but I just think all those things are just major factors of like, hey, who is your family? Like your grandma sitting you down. Like, what do we believe? Like, to me, that's like crazy powerful moment for a kid. Like, you didn't forget it. Like, you were probably like 7 years old. You were probably like, running around, and my grandma sat me down, and those conversations are short, but like they're like seared in your memory. It's like, this is who I am. Oh, okay. So when someone tells me that, XYZ, it's like, no, I know who I am. So you don't get to, you know, play with me this way. No, that's not happening.
Yeah. Well, and you see, we're often now, a lot of men like us are trying to recreate community.
Mm-hmm.
If you got 5 kids, you just recreated your community.
Mm-hmm.
You get a piece of land where you have room for 6 houses. You got a little
Mm-hmm.
one for you and your wife when you retire, because you
Mm-hmm.
don't want a massive house to look after, and you got 5 family homes for your 5 children.
Mm-hmm.
And you like set it up as a trust so that it doesn't, and nothing gets lost if there is a divorce or anything. It de-incentivizes divorce. You want to do
Mm-hmm.
everything you can to de-incentivize divorce.
Right.
People are like, well, I'm just going to be real careful and marry someone who I'm not going to get divorced to. That's half the equation. The other half is
Yes.
de-incentivizing it.
Yeah.
Like, my wife understands she'll be a lot worse off if she divorced me than she is married to me.
Mm-hmm.
Every incentive she has is to stay married. Every incentive I have is to stay married.
Right.
And then because if you've got incentives to get divorced that are greater than the incentives to stay together, now you're completely relying
Mm-hmm.
on your self control to stay together. And that's a
Mm-hmm.
fragile resource that
Yeah.
can run out, you
Yeah.
know? So you want to make sure the incentives are lined up right. And you create those. People will say that the state creates them, the government creates them, the laws. No, if
Mm-hmm.
you are a person that's that worried about the laws, you probably got tricked by the COVID. You'll probably get tricked by monkeypox. You're just going to get fooled by everything.
Mm-hmm.
Laws are irrelevant. The other day, my kid was playing with some cute little French kids at the camping place, and they hit a ball on top of the roof. And the French kid, and we go over there, and I say to my son, "Jump up on the roof and get the ball." And the
Mm-hmm.
French kid's mother says, I don't think we're allowed to do that. I think it's against the rules." And I looked at her and I said, "We don't really bother following the rules. We don't care." And her daughter actually jumped up, and after hearing that, her daughter jumped up and went and got it. And so rules are not laws. There's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
Laws come from nature. They are recognized by humans, but they come from nature. That is truth. That is the truth that my grandmother was speaking about, is natural law. Rules are, I have power and I'm going to impose my will on you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what rules are, because by rule, not
Right.
by law, not by nature,
Right.
not by reality. And you only need to follow rules when that person who's bigger than you can hurt you. As long as you can figure out how to go around the rules, how to go behind the rules don't matter,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not from nature, they're not from God. They're arbitrarily man-made, and most of them are made to take away your actual rights that you have through nature and from God. They're
Yeah.
made to circumnavigate or circumvent the true law and reality. And so, for example, most of the rules about marriage, that society implements on you are designed to break up families because it's a very profitable industry. The divorce industry is very
Mm-hmm.
profitable. So I made it so none of those rules mattered. I
Yeah.
created a situation in which none of that matters to my marriage. All the incentives are in favor of staying together. And that was choices I made, difficult choices I made. And it requires me to be sufficiently valuable too, that there's no way my wife can do better without me than she can
Mm-hmm.
with me. It
Yeah.
also requires me to make sure she understands that I'm not going to follow the rules. I'm going to follow the law. And the law says, this is how marriages work. And she has to agree to that too.
Mm-hmm.
But that's more important. That you can create your entire community with your 5 children.
Right.
They have 5 kids each. Now you got 25 kids running around. That third generation is the size of most small villages. Most small villages are 25 to 50 families.
It's funny. We talk to the kids about like how many kids they're gonna have, and some of them are like, they're really young, so like, we're gonna have 10 kids. Like, oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome, that's amazing. And then one of our kids was like, I'm not gonna have that many kids, and we were like, oh, so I'm thinking of a really low number, and the kid was like, I'm gonna have 4. I was like, oh, that's enough. That's good. All right, cool.
And don't
Like
forget, you
four,
thought to
four.
have 2 and you got
Yeah,
5. He'll think about 4 and get 10.
yeah. So it's like, oh, like I thought that was like, because you have a few kids too, so it's a challenge. We don't really have like it's very rootless here. Like we just moved into a new neighborhood. Like I remember growing up, like we could go out and there would be kids outside playing. That's a thing too, where it's like kids don't really come outside and play. So it's like, oh, like when I prayed when we moved to this house, like, hey, that there'd be kids so my kids could go outside and play and be with other kids, because I think I can have a tendency to be a helicopter dad, like your son, climbing up on the roof. Like I want them to do those things, but if I'm around, I'm gonna be like, hey, don't do that. So I want to not be around so that they can just go, because I know that about myself. So just like that's why one of the reasons I had more kids too is like I can't watch all of them, so they're gonna get into some mischief. Like I'm cool with mischief. Like it's mischief, I think is innocent, just kind of harmless.
Yeah.
Like I want them to get into that stuff. I did want to ask you, because you had kind of mentioned it, like you're having like when your son turns like 10 or 11 or 12, I think like you're gonna have like a rite of passage for him. I've always been really interested in this, because like I've thought about it, but like I don't really know what that's gonna look like for my sons for sure. Like my daughters, I don't know, but my sons, I've thought about like what's a rite of passage for them. So do you mind sharing like
Yes.
what you
Yes.
kind of had in mind?
I'll,
Because I
I'll
think that's
share
like a
it to you
really
with
great
you.
idea.
I'll share with you what I can share with you that's general knowledge for this. And
Okay.
there are some things, and I think every family needs to have some private knowledge that stays
Mm-hmm.
within the family that is, your own patented secret techniques of how to
Okay.
make life work. But
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you the general stuff. So he's going to have 2. He's going to have one now because he's hitting puberty. And then
Mm-hmm.
he's going to have another one when he actually is old enough to take on the responsibilities of a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that, because he's entering in the in-between period. He's not a
Mm-hmm.
child anymore at 9 years old, especially since he's hitting puberty. He's
Mm-hmm.
also not a man yet because he can't bear the burdens of a man.
Mm-hmm.
And that in-between period, I think the most important period, honestly, is babyhood until where he is now. And the second is where he is now until manhood.
Mm-hmm.
Your personality is mostly set by the end of that cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's where you're going to choose what direction you're going to go. Are you going to be a man, or are you going to be um, uh, are you going to stay an animal? Are you going to be a tame animal or an untamed animal? So a tamed animal or a slave,
Mm-hmm.
basically. And
Mm-hmm.
an untamed animal is, are you going to be a danger to society? And you figure
Yeah.
that out sometime in your teen years before you become a full man. So here's the ceremony goes. All coming of age ceremonies for men and women include the shedding of blood, always have.
Mm-hmm.
For women, that happens naturally because they have menses.
Mm-hmm.
So what women have is they have the beginning of menses, and then they have when they have their first child is that second stage. She's a girl until she has a child, and then she's a woman. That would be
Mm.
historically how we had it.
Okay.
So for boys, we're not going to, we don't have that natural forced upon us by nature
Mm-hmm.
path of growing up. So they have to do something, certain things. They have to have tests. There are four things that make you a man. There is your strength. That is your physical, mental, moral, emotional strength. There is your courage. And again, that's on those dimensions of physical, emotional, moral, spiritual courage. You have your mastery. That is your ability to become incredibly good at something. And then you have, and then the fourth one is your honor. That is your reputation with other men. Is there any other men who would vouch for you? If you were in trouble and someone said, did my son's name Levi? Did Levi lie? Is there any man who would go, no, I know him. He doesn't lie.
Mm-hmm.
If no one will stand up for you, if no other man's going to stand for you, you don't have honor.
Mm-hmm.
Because honor isn't something you give yourself. It's something other men give you.
Yes.
So what he has to do is demonstrate that he's growing in all of those areas. So I'm going to have him for the strength. I'm going to have him do some tests of strength. He's been working out all summer long. He's getting quite strong.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to have a test of strength. And I'm going to probably test him with the kettlebells. I'll have him carry some kettlebells around all day long. That'll be day one. You're going to carry around. I mean, he does kettlebell swings now with half his body weight.
Wow.
He does 50 of those every day. So I'll probably take one slightly lighter than that. So I'll carry it all day. Carry this with you all day long.
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be his test of strength. I might do some, sprinting and stuff with him as well. He's going to have to test of courage. I'm going to give him a live rooster, and he's got to kill it and butcher it.
Mm.
That's going to be his test of courage, because there now we involve blood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When it comes time for the actual ceremony, he's going to prick his finger, or I'm going to probably prick it for him to make sure he doesn't hurt himself too badly.
Mm-hmm.
And as the blood leaves you, so does your childishness.
Mm-hmm.
These things are symbolic, but because pain is great for helping us remember things.
Mm-hmm.
You hit your foot on the edge of the bed. You remember to walk around the corner of the bed for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not forcing him to do any of this. I've discussed it with him, and he's happy to go through this process.
Yes.
And it's a drop of blood. It's not, he's like, I'm not going to slice the end of his finger off.
Yeah. Yeah.
The purpose is that he needs to understand that there are serious changes happening. Now, people will say, oh, this is so cruel, are the same people that chop off the end of a child's penis to
Mm-hmm.
circumcise them and think nothing of it. Now, none of that happened to my kid. So his coming of age ceremony, though, will harken back to what our ancestors did. I will then tell him his responsibilities now as an in-between a man and a boy. He has to put away the things of a boy and begin to take on the things of a man. And he's agreed to go back. He's been wanting to go back for ages to kickboxing. And he agreed to, in the next year, take a fight. So I'm going to put him back in kickboxing and tell him, get him ready for for his age level boxing competition. And that helps him.
Going back. So if you know what I mean, he's 9, going to be 10.
Yeah, he'll be 10 when he does the fight. Yeah.
Okay, so that's but so yeah, you're preparing him as because I have a kid that's kind of in the same age, and so I'm thinking like, oh, like,
yeah,
part of this is like, hey, I get to learn from you, and I think all those, like, I very much always had this question, and I think I've even asked it on Twitter, like, hey, what are some rites of passage? Because like we're very disconnected here, and I very much want my kids to be rooted. I very much want them to feel that capable strength. And like for me, like I mentioned football because that was a big thing for me, because that's like the one place, like, here it's even and we're talking years ago now, sit in the classroom, like you don't feel like you have a place as a boy, like it's always sit in the classroom and write. And it was like finally when you get to do, like, and we're talking American football, not soccer, for the European listeners who listen to this. So it's very, very much a place where it's like you could feel like a warrior almost.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like there was no other place like that where you could just like, hit somebody like really hard and be like, oh, great job. It's like, oh, great job. Like, oh,
football requires courage.
That's awesome. Yeah. And so like my kids are younger, and I'm not sure if I'm gonna I'll let them play, but I don't want to be like, hey, I was football dad, so you're gonna do like, you're like, no, like, if you like it, I'm gonna make them try it. But having those things, but also like, I know here it might be the same in Portugal, like the rite of passage for men now is like, the first time you have sex and then you turn 21 and you get, blackout drunk. Like those are the rites of passage. There's nothing positive, helpful, fruitful that comes from that. So it's like, I want them to be set up with things that are going to strengthen them and not what.
Traditional coming of age ceremonies usually involved some alcohol.
Mm-hmm,
There wasn't drunkenness necessarily, although lots of people took what was a healthy thing and went overboard in all of
mm-hmm,
human history.
mm-hmm,
When I have this ceremony, he will have a sip of whiskey from my
mm-hmm,
whiskey flask, and he'll have a puff on my cigar.
mm-hmm,
But it is showing him you're allowed to taste the things of being a man, but you're not ready to have them for yourself yet.
mm-hmm,
So he's allowed under supervision to begin bearing the weight of a man,
mm-hmm.
but he's not allowed to do that without supervision.
Right.
And the reason you do this is you do not want the forbidden things to be a tantalizing mystery.
Mm-hmm.
You want the forbidden things to know I'm going to get the forbidden things eventually. They won't be forbidden forever. They're forbidden because I'm a kid. That
Yeah.
makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I'll just wait until I'm old enough.
Yeah. And then
Versus no, those are the things you cannot touch. And, you
yeah.
know,
And then it's just it's natural, right? For
yeah,
I mean, I'm speaking as a man, like as a boy, it's like, oh, that's forbidden. Like I want that. Like
yeah.
yeah, like I'm gonna want it more. And then now when I got it, to go overboard. I think those are just like, I don't know. The most important thing, like I've always thought about myself, like when I was younger, I kind of thought about like who I wanted to be. It's like I just want to be I want to be a good father and a good husband. And so those are always been things that I've kind of been on my mind. And then, the world that our kids are stepping into is, has radically changed. I mean, the people are still the same, but things have radically changed. So you have to be very intentional. And I've said that multiple times. And so it's like, I want to be very intentional. We homeschool our kids now. Like I always thought my kids were going to go to public school because I was a public school kid. And I was like, well, it was good enough for me. And then like, I was kind of a cheapskate back then too. Like, well, I'm not going to spend money on their stuff, but now I spend, the kids need this for their school. Like, all right, well, let's open it up. Because it's like these are my kids. I'm shooting them off into the future. I want them to be prepared.
Well, and the
I
public
reckon.
school you went to doesn't exist anymore. It's been
No, it
completely
doesn't.
infiltrated and overturned.
No, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. That whole thing. Like I remember, even during like football, like before the game, like we would pray, but the coaches couldn't lead it. But so like a kid had to kind of lead the prayer, and I can't imagine that they'd even allow that now. So I mean, this is a little over 20 years ago, but yeah, like all of that stuff is just, yeah, whatever you thought about, like that place doesn't exist anymore. So that's
Yeah.
that's why we're doing it, because I never would have thought we would be doing homeschooling. I was like, this is weird kids, man. Like I don't want my kids to be like weird. Like no way. But I mean, I've met like on Twitter like guys that were homeschooled, and it's like, oh, like these guys are really smart. They're smarter than I am. So it's like, let's try this out, because the goal for me as a father is I want my kids to go farther than I did. So don't think that what was good for you is going to be good for them, especially if you can give them better. Like let's give them better.
When your kids are going to see you working from home, and they're going to go, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
Like my son's already like, yeah, I can give kids advice. He says I can give kids advice. So I'm like, okay, what advice are you going to give them?
Yeah.
Don't start fires that you can't control, and be very careful with knives. He's like giving us
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
advice
Yeah.
I give to him. Be
Uh-huh.
this is how. So he's just the stuff I told him. He's going to tell somebody else. The
Mm-hmm.
reality is, there's nobody alive today who's giving advice who didn't get that from somewhere else.
Right.
Yeah, sometimes we synthesize something new out of all the advice we
Right.
got.
Right.
My book isn't just other people's words quoted. I
Right.
synthesized something new out of that, but everything that's in here I learned either from personal experience or from an older relative or friend or someone who's gone through these
Right.
things telling me, and I pulled all that truth out. I filtered all of that truth from
Mm-hmm.
40 something years of life and then put it into one place so you can get it easier. That was the
Right.
value I put. I didn't create
anything.
a way of identifying manipulation. I just made it easy for you to understand.
I love that because I'm a Bible guy. I mean, I don't know like the Bible, like scriptures, like full on. Like I can tell you the address of it and everything, but I know like there's nothing new under the sun. So like like you'll see on Twitter's like, hey man, come up with something new. It's like, well, there's nothing new. You just say it. You say it different, and I think it's really cool that you take these ideas and it's like you say it the way you say it, and that's gonna help people who let's just say are in alignment with you. And so they say a guy with a long beard, they'll be like, oh, that's pretty cool. I'm going to listen to it. Whereas if I was to say the same thing and be like, oh, I don't like that guy. I don't like his hair. He's too dark. I don't know. Whatever. People have kind of all kinds of crazy things that they kind of, biases and, just kind of history that they put on things. And so it's like, yeah, the way I say something, you could say it and it'll hit. It just hits differently just because we're two different people and say it in a different way. But I love that, man. I really do that. I'm gonna have to check the book out. Like I'm a I love to buy books guy, and I don't read them, but I love like one day I'll have the time to read all the books, like especially like all the Twitter homies. It's like, oh well, this person wrote a book, like, oh yeah, I gotta check that out.
Just read the
But
first chapter. Read the first
that's it.
chapter. If you don't feel like finishing the rest of the book, I screwed up.
But one thing I do really like about you is that you systematize stuff and like
Yeah.
you kind of like break things down because especially you know me, right? This is me personally, is like people will have like great information and like their courses and stuff like that, but it's just like, hey, I don't have all the time and bandwidth to go through like 12 hours of videos and read like 300 pages of books. Like if you can like break it down for me, like you did with the rite of passage, like, hey, like in 3 minutes, this is it. Like, oh, I can take it and apply it. Like I love that, especially like as a busy dad. Like I have a job, I have kids, I have I'm a husband, I have all these responsibilities, but I still have the desire to learn and grow. But I don't want to like, hey, you got to spend 2 hours a day reading this book. It's like, no, like look here, quick, boom, take it and systematize it. And I love that about the way that you work, and also just the way that you kind of like see things into the future and are always kind of like, okay, I see where this is leading. You're gonna mess up, so don't go that right. Don't start that fire. That's gonna be all bad. I really do enjoy that about you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's getting ahead on things is going to help. And what you mentioned about not don't have time to read 2 hours a day. The people who are reading 2 hours a day are generally not accomplishing much. They've gotten into this like gluttony for information, and
Mm-hmm.
they're just absorbing and absorbing, and that's great when you're somewhere between like 15 and 20, and
Mm-hmm.
you're for one reason or another you can't get out and do the things you want to do. Although don't believe that at 15 I was out doing insane crazy
Yeah.
things, dropped out of school and went and did crazy things. But for most kids, they're just not going to do that. Read about the people who are doing crazy things. But man, as soon as you can cut
Mm-hmm.
that reading way back. Just read what you need to read to figure out what you need to do, and then get out
Yeah.
there and do stuff.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, man. And I think we're wrapping up here. Do you have anything else coming down the pike besides the book? I mean, we're going to direct them
Um,
to your
I
Twitter
have the book.
handle.
I have written a course. I haven't recorded it yet because I had off and on laryngitis. It
Hmm.
seems to be gone now. So as soon as the summer is over, I'm going to. I can't record it right now. It is sweltering in here. As soon as the summer is over, I'm going to record the course, record the audiobook. That'll be available. And the course will take you through how to stop manipulating yourself specifically,
Hmm.
because you can't be manipulated if you're not willing to internalize that manipulation. So
Hmm.
you have to agree to it. Why do you agree to it? Because you've already manipulated yourself into a position where you feel you have to. If you can get
Yeah.
over that, you don't even need to know exactly the details of manipulation, and you're going to start to resist it automatically.
Yeah. Yeah. It all starts with you, right? That's kind of the wherever you go, wherever I go, there I am. So you
Yeah,
you you are the one. So it starts with you. He is Noah Revoy. You can find him on Twitter at Noah Revoy and on his website, noahrevoy.com. No, this has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, man. I'm finally glad we were able to connect and get this done
it's
because
been
the time
fantastic.
zones. It's like, yeah, let's get this thing done.
We'll have to make
Thank you so
a
much.
second go of it to talk about my the story that you
Yes,
want to talk about.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
That'll be the next one for sure. Take care, everybody.